This has to do with the perception that patents in the 20th century became a major tool by which big industrial combines could tie themselves together and develop lastingly dominant positions in particular industries. So the great example in the early 20th century is AT&T, which developed a complete monopoly on long-distance telephony in the US, fantastically profitable. By the 30s, AT&T had the largest conglomeration of capital of anybody ever, any group ever created. And it would do this, allegedly, by buying up every patent that was ever filed on anything related to long-distance telephony. So amplifiers, repeaters, any technology that might be the basis for some kind of alternative power center. This culminated in hearings in the Roosevelt administration, which were incredibly embittered about AT&T and the very nature of patenting, whether patenting should be effectively abolished to get rid of this practice. Norbert Wiener was a mathematician at MIT, who, if anybody is responsible for the phrase "information wants to be free," maybe it was him.
Right.
He's
regarded as the father of cybernetics, is he not?
Exactly, cybernetics, yes.
Yeah.
And in the 20s, when he was a relatively young professor at MIT, he developed a filtering technique, a filtering technology for discriminating signal from noise in electronic systems. And this would have been critical for some long-distance telephony. So AT&T bought up the patent, and of course it never did anything with it.
Yeah.
And he actually had another patent, which AT&T also bought up and never did anything with.
Yeah.
And this really kind of seems to have burned into his soul in a certain way. So he spent a large part of the rest of his life, as well as inventing cybernetics, excoriating AT&T and, in fact, the whole patent system at large for creating immoral culture of research, an immoral culture of a knowledge industry. So in the 50s, when he was writing much broader pieces about the nature of information and the emerging information society, he made patenting into the counterpart of, as it were, a jamming device for the signals that might enable a grand future of an information economy. He's really the progenitor, in a certain way, of the ideology of openness in information.
You know, the way you describe it, it's really interesting. People who are creative people, they don't do it just for the money. Oh, they're not going to turn down the money and they want a decent amount of it and so on and so forth. I'll stipulate to that, as lawyers say. But they really want their work to get out there into the world. And the way you described Wiener, it almost sounds like he was very bitter that his brainchild had been suppressed. And anybody who's creative will understand that.
Yeah, it's an incredibly frustrating thing.
Yeah.
But that gets to another way of talking about these issues, which has been current at least since the 18th century, and I think maybe a lot longer than that, which is to think of them as in some ways the moral counterpart of children. They spring from some particular individual. And in that sense, there's an individuality that goes with one's creative work that maybe is inalienable, and it's certainly inimitable.
Yeah. Right.
That puts a different spin on all of these considerations, because in that light, these are not just economic issues at all. They do have issues of a real moral freight.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.